Some people will tell you to play it safe. We're here to tell you to go all out. Welcome to the All Out Blitz. I am your host, JJ Wenner, and I am joined by my keen co-host, Doug Orth. How are you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Got some sun yesterday. I don't know if you can see it, but I got some sun, so I'm feeling good. Heading on the vacation later this week, so things are well.
Yes, I can definitely tell. You are so much darker than normal. Come on, man. You're just a different shade of pasty. Let's not pretend here. Let's not pretend. But anyway, today on the pod, we are going to be walking you through how to start playing Dynasty. That's right. This pod is for all of you redraft managers who might be a little bit apprehensive about where to begin. If that is you, then we are here to assist. And to help us out, I'm excited to welcome our first guest to the All Out Blitz. You may know him from his series, The Dynasty Investor, or his fantastic work with the Devy Royale. I was lucky enough to meet him 2 years ago at the Expo, and just continuously blown away by his approach to the game. You can find him on X at _Jason Stein. It's Jay Stein. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. And that first time meeting you at the Fantasy Expo was all my pleasure because I was very new coming into this space, and you welcomed me. You showed me around. You introduced me to people. So it was just you're one of those first people that I think of as just being so welcoming in this space. So thanks to you, JJ.
Oh,
I'm happy to be here, man.
We're looking to make JJ like the ambassador for the Kings Classic and the Expo moving forward.
As long as I get a uniform, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Well, Jay, not to jump right into it, but I have a question for you. Kyren Williams is out for spring practices with a foot injury. Now, Edwin Porras, who's at FB Injury Doc on X, remarked that it is his third ankle or foot injury in 2 years, and he is concerned. So my question to you, are you looking to move Williams? Like, what's your reaction to this news?
So not an injury expert. I would not be able to comment on whether that means that, it's more likely that he's injured again or not. What I would say is that Kyren Williams, basically since the start of this year or the end of last year, through draft season has already been decreasing quite a bit in terms of price and value in the screen. So this is just sort of adding a little bit, but I do think that there's a floor, and the floor is coming up very fast on Kyren Williams. And so where I actually, in my Dynasty Investor Series work, I had him as a sell candidate on February 28th, 2024. Since then, he's decreased in KTC in value about 10% since then already. So we are getting to where my price target is on Kyren Williams. So where I'm getting to a point is where I'm upgrading him from a sell to a hold right now, because I think there's already been so much value taken away from him since the end of last year. Now, if you go and look at, just some of the pieces of the Kyren Williams story, he's projected by consensus to score about 17.8 fantasy points per game, which puts him squarely in an RB1 category. And he's only 23 years old, 23.7 years old. So he's almost 24, but under 25 range. So these types of players, these very young guys that score around 18 fantasy points per game, are incredibly valuable. But like, we've seen that value and that price fall quite a bit already. Let's not pile on. I still think this guy can score 17-ish, 18-ish fantasy points per game. And the real move was to be selling him after the end of last year, before the NFL draft. And I think we've already captured in the pricing that move down. And now we're getting to the point where it's to a hold. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense to me. But Doug, I know you, based on our last pod, you don't allow narrative to alter your rankings drastically.
That's right. Anti-narrative.
But are you shifting your thoughts on Blake Corum at all with this news?
Yeah, I don't feel like this is so much a narrative as it is dealing with the reality of the situation in real time. I anticipated Corum would be used somewhat liberally to keep Williams healthy anyway. I also would say I anticipated Williams may not be able to hold up long term if he was used like he was last year. I think he was something like 22, 23 touches a game last year. Anyway, Corum was ranked 13th on my 1 QB rookie rankings and 17th in my Superflex rankings. So anyway, I'm not sure I see a world in which he makes Williams irrelevant over the next 2 years unless we find out Williams is expected to miss significant time this season. So it'd be difficult for me to push him much higher than I already have him unless I was the Williams manager in my league and wanted to handcuff him.
All right. Thank you for the update. Now, our comprehensive 2024 IDP Plus rookie guide is now available. So if you want good information about rookies, you don't get it from Doug and Jay, you could get the rookie draft guide for a limited time only for $9.99. Now, the latest version is going to include all the post-draft feedback you need to dominate your drafts. So check out the link in the show description and make sure you download your copy today. Now, gentlemen, I love Dynasty football. Period. It's the most fulfilling way for me to play fantasy. You know, I have separation anxiety. I don't like to let go of things. But many people who want to join a Dynasty League can become intimidated by the unknown. So tonight, Doug and I wanted to bring Jay, who does amazing work in the Dynasty world, on to answer some basic questions that a new Dynasty manager might have. And where better to start than how to find a league, right? How do you pick your first league? So, Jay, what do you look for when you're joining a league?
Yeah, so I'll quickly go through what I look for here. I'm looking for active leagues, and a lot of times that comes with familiarity. So if you know the people, if you've played in redraft with people, but just sort of seeing that there's an active dialogue or chat. Do they even have a chat? Is there a Discord for the league? Is there Slack? Do they communicate through the sleeper chat? And is it kind of moving? Are there trades? If I'm really hesitant and I don't know very many people in there, I'll ask to kind of see the league and look at the transactions and see how many transactions are occurring. And then I'd say, is it competitive? Sometimes you get in a league where you have 2 or 3 managers that are just doing it because they've done it every year, but they're not really active. They're not really interested, and it's very competitive. The other thing I'd say is I want to make sure that we're on the same skill level. So if you're a beginner in Dynasty, at least if you're sort of just getting into it, I'd want to be in a league where maybe the commissioner has some experience and maybe is kind of running it, but a lot of beginners within that same league. So, you can get in there and make some mistakes and try and figure things out. And so just sort of an even playing field is also pretty important to me.
Great answer. The active leagues are definitely a lot more fun, and they're a lot easier to fill as a commissioner. Doug, what do you look for?
Yeah, as we established here, I think last week and maybe even the week before, so I'm more of a high stakes and play for money kind of guy. And I do have something to add to what Jay said, but I'll just say the only things I look for after the scoring setup and the rules is the buy-in and the payouts. I'm going into each of my leagues with the not knowledge, but with the confidence that if I do what I'm supposed to do, I'm going to be among the top 3 or 4 teams of the league. So that's not cockiness. That's just confidence, knowing based on 10 plus years of Dynasty experience. Now, I will say, Jay, you mentioned something about being able to know that you can make a mistake here along the way, here or there or along the way. Let me tell you. So I can tell you that I've had all this success. It's in my Twitter bio, JJ. I talked to JJ about it. I can tell you 2 of the dumbest things that I've done in Dynasty leagues. First and foremost, you remember Aaron Jones' rookie year, which was the same year as Jamal Williams' rookie year? Okay. I drafted Aaron Jones in the 4th round of the rookie draft, and I loved the prospect, watched him at Utah, thinking, okay, I like what I have. I don't remember who was ahead of him on the depth chart, but for some godforsaken reason, I dropped him. This is so whenever what this was 2016 or whatever. So yeah, I ended up I'm not paying for it anymore. I was able to eventually replace the missing points, but still that hurt. And then the other one, this was probably my first year in the Experts Dynasty League, which is probably whatever T.Y. Hilton's rookie year was. Same thing. I dropped him. I dropped T.Y. Hilton because you remember the legend that was Donnie Avery? He had probably his one good game. He had his one good game, and I went for that apparently. So, but yeah, two really dumb mistakes, and I'll just that second one isn't so much one that I could learn from, other than just not to give up on good rookies. Secondly, though, and going back to the Aaron Jones story, you don't give up on your draft picks. At least not the first year. Even your fourth rounders, you got to have a damn good reason to give up on your rookie picks, because they carry a lot of value.
So if you're out there and you're nervous about effing up in Dynasty, we've all done it. We have all made the trade where we look back after a year and we're like, oh dear God, why did I do that? But sometimes you're going to be on the other side of the trade. Mm-hmm. I always tease my buddy Trip Brebner about, we were into this 96 team premier type league, and I traded Kerryon Johnson to him for 3 firsts.
Ooh.
Best trade ever. But somebody has to mess up to get the best trade ever. So sometimes it's going to be you. Sometimes it's going to be your trade partner. Now, when we're looking at league size, do you have a preference, Doug?
Yeah, you're going to find out a lot about me in this episode, but so I'm very stringent, very strict on what I like in a league, but
no. Sorry.
I only care playing 12-teamers. That's redraft or dynasty. I guess the 14-team Kings Classic is my one exception to the rule, but for obvious reasons. I find 10-teamers to be too star heavy, the rosters to be too star heavy, and I think anything more than 12-teamers is too dependent on injury luck.
Jay, are you the same way?
Yeah, I think I prefer 12-teamers. I think that most of the industry content is driven towards that standardization of around a 12-team league, which makes it, like all the information, all the stuff you're getting makes it, I think, more valuable. That being the case, my home league is a 10-person league. It's a redraft home league that's been, we've been doing it for 2 decades now. And it's a 10-team league, and there's some interesting elements to it. I play in a couple of 14-team leagues. There's actually 2 leagues that I play in that are 32-team single copy leagues, which are just an incredible element. So I think my preference, just because of all the information, all the content is driven around the 12-person league, and that's where sort of the industry standard is. I think I'd probably prefer that. But what's interesting is there's a little bit of different variety that you get in terms of strategies and how to play.
Yes.
If you're doing it a little bit different, and you can take that knowledge that you've built up, say you are really good at evaluating rookies, you can take that knowledge and then use it and apply it through different strategies in different leagues. Now, my preference is 12, but I really, honestly, some of my favorite leagues are those non-standard ones, like the 32 single copy league. Is just like, that is just tremendously fun to do that thing, that type of league. So 12 person team leagues, I think I would say is probably what I would look for to start.
So if you are a beginner, we're basically trying to tell you the crazy leagues are a lot of fun, but get your feet wet on a 12-team, right? Get used to it, figure it out, make your mistakes in a 12-team league, because it's a lot harder to recover if you're in a 16-team league from a bad mistake. So start off slow, and we'll see where we go. Now, settings. We talked about settings. I've noticed that every type of setting that you can add, from Superflex, PPR, tight end premium, IDP, all changes the difficulty levels. So which of those settings do you prefer, Jay, when you're entering a dynasty league?
I think the standard is now becoming the 12-team league, Superflex, a PPR, and I think more and more now you're starting to get some level of tight end premium as sort of a standard, but that piece of it, that tight end premium piece, might not be it. But we've already begun the transition to Superflex leagues. I think most of the ones that are coming out now are Superflex or close to Superflex. And then I think we've again started this transition from non-PPR leagues to some sort of PPR-ness, whether it's half point or regular PPR. And so, like that kind of fits into that narrative of just if you want to be sort of in that standard, that 12-team Superflex, PPR, some piece of tight end premium, that kind of gets you into the realm of like where kind of most of the leagues in my world, or the way I see it, kind of operate. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't like or enjoy the strategy of a 1 QB league. It's just as interesting and difficult as well to navigate. But that's kind of where my experience has gone into that Superflex. I do like the 2 QB elements. I think it like those types of changes from 1 QB to Superflex is sort of like putting premium and emphasis on certain positions that I think needed that premium and emphasis into it. And now it's becoming, the game is evolving and becoming even better because of these transitions to these types of leagues.
Well, Doug, we have the other JJ in the industry. Between us, we have a lot of followers. Built his whole brand about taking late round QBs, right? Like that was the whole concept. But do you think we should just change standard to mean Superflex PPR? Because standard is no longer standard.
I'm going to say no, and JR and I are going to butt heads on this. And but I understand. I'm going to go for a while, unfortunately. So buckle up, guys.
All right, I'll get ready to play you off.
This is another area. The settings. What we're talking about here is another area where I draw a hard line. I'm pretty much fundamentally against Superflex leagues for the most part for four reasons. One, fantasy football is supposed to reflect the real thing, and any 2 quarterback setup does not do that. Number 2, I don't feel as though Superflex leagues enhance the value of top flight quarterbacks so much as they increase the value of low end quarterbacks who would not usually be on fantasy rosters in 1 quarterback leagues. Number 3, quarterback is the one position in fantasy where there is a bit of a scarcity in terms of the number of starting jobs, especially in Superflex. Once the league has drafted all 32 starting quarterbacks, it likely means 4 managers are out of luck, and thus they're willing to empty the fab on for every Zach Wilson that falls into playing time once Aaron Rodgers gets hurt. I'm sorry, I didn't even think about that being a Jets example until I just now. Sorry.
Remember, this is a Jets podcast, and we do not mention his name.
And then number 4, and this, I don't know if this is the one that gets me the most, but number 4, if one of your quarterbacks goes down for any length of time, your season is most likely over at that point, unless you prioritized a third quarterback, say, over a second running back or a third receiver. What do you think, Jay? What do you think, Jay?
I think all those points are incredibly logical and valid. So I don't really have too many pushbacks. I do think that, like, if in the NFL there's such a QB emphasis that they're very important. And when you're trying to mirror the fantasy to the NFL in 1 QB leagues, the importance of having like that second QB is greatly de-emphasized in 1 QB leagues. And so much more emphasis on running backs and wide receivers and tight ends, all the other positions. And I think that that's maybe not what happens in the NFL, but I don't have a logical, well thought out argument in terms of refuting any of your points, because I think all those make a lot of sense for real.
I think back to the last Superflex draft I was in, which was I think it was the Huddle Superflex League, which is a free experts league. And I think that was 2 years ago. And I remember seeing guys like Drew Lock going in the second or third round. And it just, and that's, I don't mean to drag him in the mud or anything like that, but just the panic that it causes early in drafts, or if you want to say the chaos, however you wanted to phrase it, guys that that any avid football fan is going to say, you know what, I'm doing this to fill a position. I'm not doing it because I believe in the talent. That's one that I think back to that example about Drew Lock going before like Jonathan Taylor, for example. I mean, that type of stuff.
Well, I mean, it's all supply and demand at the different positions.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
Currently, like in a lot of draft strategies, emphasize sort of the wide receivers over time, and just through like zero RB strategies, or anti-fragile strategies, and then the even though wide receivers will score less points than some of the high end running backs, you'll see a lot more wide receivers go because they retain their value, and they have this ability to produce at a above a replacement level value more so than some of the running backs. Sort of like shoot, I lost my train of thought. Where were we? What were we trying to talk about?
Value, scarcity.
Oh, yeah. So, there's this like scarcity piece to it that comes with the supply and demand aspect of it, and for one QB leagues, if you're creating that scarcity aspect at going from one QB to Superflex, it's the same rules of the game. And you'll have that supply and demand problem at QB position. And then you just have to figure out how you're going to deal with that in the draft. And a lot of times that means you're drafting a QB in the second round that you might, in one QB, might not touch till the 15th round or something like that. There's not that much value, but in Superflex, then he becomes incredibly valuable because the replacement guy that you can pick up off waivers is not going to produce any fantasy points.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of like the game within the game, that supply and demand piece of the quarterback in that Superflex. You just have to play the game, and I do agree with you that it can get like Drew Lock in the second is kind of annoying and frustrating, but as long as you know the rules of the game while you're playing it, you should be able to maximize how you get through it. So
definitely, it's as the more anybody plays in this hobby, you should be able. I call what I have the big board, but I mean anybody's big board should be able to be flexible enough that I don't care if we're starting 3 quarterbacks. Well, that means then I absolutely need to draft quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds. That's without question. So you should be able to adjust your big board based on the rules. I mean, I know that sounds basic, but we are kind of talking basic. Doesn't matter. I'll use the Kings Classic, for example. We have 4 flex spots. And that sounds like pure madness for any beginner. How do you fill 4 flex spots in a 14-team league? Exactly. We all think the same thing too.
Every year you do. Every year. On my perspective now, first of all, you guys are way smarter than me, so I'm going to bring it down a couple steps. I love all the nuances that you can add in to a dynasty league. I always make the illusion that it's sort of like sex. Like everybody starts off kind of normal, and then you try something and you're like, well, maybe I like that. And then all of a sudden, like, it gets weird, and you're in like an IDP league with balanced scoring where defensive tackles score as much as like QB1s, and all of a sudden you're in trouble. Like, that's when you need to get some help. Like, yell out your safe word, and somebody needs to pull you out of some of those leagues. But I try to stay away from that kind of conversation just in case a student tunes in. But I was using an analogy of somebody else, not
me. Hey, Jay, I think you and I are carrying the pod the rest of the way. The FCC has just banned JJ, so.
So, okay. Let's get over settings. Jay, you had talked a little bit about commissioners and looking for your league mates, right? Like paying attention to who's in the league. And Doug, I know based on our conversations in the past, in your high stakes leagues, you don't know anybody. For the most part, like you're lucky if you know somebody. So, Jay, do you prefer to be in leagues with people you know?
So yeah, I guess that gets into the fun versus profit type of thing. And so with a high stakes league with a high buy-in, everybody there is going to be high end, top of the level. They're in it. They're going for it. When the buy-in is much smaller, then it becomes more important to emphasize who you're with, who you're playing with, what the commissioner's like, because when it's high stakes, the commissioner's not messing around. The bylaws are the bylaws. There's no discussion points or, bringing up things. That's the way it is. That's to the letter, to the T. And everybody in that league's going to, have some sort of experience with it and know what's going on. With the smaller buy-ins, so first of all, commissioners they're amazing. They're awesome people. If you are a commissioner, thank you for all the work you do. I'm sorry for all of the drama and all of the questions you do have to answer. I do recommend that you commission at least one league just to kind of feel what it's like to do that and keep that commission going for as long time. If the league folds, start a new one where you're the commissioner. At least one, because you need to know what it feels like to be the commissioner so that you treat all commissioners properly when you're doing it. The way that I got in was I was primarily redraft for a very long time, for about 10 years. And then I got into Dynasty because one of my friends that I did redraft with, a buddy I went to college with, I kept winning his league. And he's like, Jay, you need to come and play this Dynasty. It's like the next level. You gotta come. So he brought me into his league. And he was the commissioner, so I kind of knew what I was getting into. He helped me sort of get my feet on the ground, figure out how everything's going. And then the process was that I got into these leagues, and then I started meeting people in the leagues through sort of being active, being in the flow of any trades, and getting to know these other people. And then sort of that expands from there. Your group of people that expands from there, and say one of the guys that's a league mate, he wants to start a league that does this piece of it. And so because I know him, I have experience with him, I'll go and join his league, and I'm in 3 different leagues, and I know all of these guys that I've played with, and so that piece of it, that familiarity piece of it, the league that you'll know is active, that are all good Dynasty members, that you can all do different things. Then you have these commissioners that and you have some sort of familiarity with, and they're not going to let things fall through the cracks and stuff like that. I think that's fairly important. Commissioners have a really tough job. They get all of the complaining. They have to handle that. Any disagreements, they have to handle that. They are responsible for the bylaws and enforcing the bylaws. They have to handle that. Any of the maintenance from a year-to-year league, they have to handle that. It's not easy to be the commissioner, and sort of a thankless job because you don't get paid to do it, and you're most of the time you don't get paid to do it, and you're just sort of putting out fires with very few thank yous along the way. So. Round of applause to all the commissioners out there. If you're going to join a league where you don't know the commissioner, that's where sort of some of the investigation comes into place. Now, a lot of times, I'll go into the league, look at the team, look at the settings, look at the trade activity, look at the chats and activity there, before I join something where I don't really know something. If the stakes are lower, and if we talked about higher, if the stakes are much higher, then you sort of have this level of expectations where you envision a lot of that stuff is probably handled. The one thing I'd say that I would recommend to all new Dynasty managers, and it's not to say that they're going to be good commissioners and they're going to be bad commissioners over time. A lot of times how good the commissioner is how long the league stays around. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if you have like a sort of I don't know, a lazy commissioner, or a commissioner that doesn't follow the rules, or a commissioner that doesn't keep an active league, that dynasty league that you're paying into could fold. I think the typical dynasty life is at somewhere above 2 for dynasty leagues. And so you just have to be careful. And the point of caution that I would be is we're not sending any league fees outside of established providers. So like leaguesafe.com is one that's fairly standardized. There's a couple other ones that you can use, but when you're sending your money to commissioners, especially ones that you don't know, or to play in leagues, and that just make sure that you're sending it through some sort of like league safe thing where it requires everybody in the league to vote to send out payments, and there's no like funny businesses with PayPal or any of that other stuff. So that's what I'd say in terms of knowing your commissioner, not knowing your commissioner, where the buy-ins are, and how to be careful with your money.
Yeah, another good thing to remember about commissioners is how much work do you have to do to get into the league personally. So if they're just saying, hey, do you want to join a league, and they put you in, that means that's how they filled all the slots. Like, you want a picky commissioner. You want somebody who's going to vet prospective new entries, right? Especially for orphans. If they're just saying, oh, you're interested? Yeah, come join. Be a little bit wary, right? Have somebody who wants to know a little bit about you before they say yes. Doug, anything to add about commissioners?
Yeah, like you said before, Jay said the very spot on analysis that you just had there. I don't have much to say about things commissioner related. On the site I play on, we pay a small fee to have people oversee our league. So I think it's like $8 per league, which is when you're dropping for the dynasty leagues. I pay $250 a year for each league. So I mean, $8 is a drop in the bucket.
So now that we kind of have it hammered out how to find a league, right? What do you look for? We went through settings, we went through buy-ins, commissioners, leagues, size, all that stuff. How should somebody prepare? How can you get an edge on your competition before the draft starts? Now, a big thing for me, especially playing like IDP leagues, you need to know your settings and your rules inside and out. That's my number one thing. Somebody's studying the rules and the scoring, and so should you. You don't want to be the person surprised, right, during the draft when somebody's like, hey, this is super flex, right? Like little things like that. In IDP, it happens all the time where people just don't pay attention to the scoring and start drafting oddly. And nobody generally will say anything. Hopefully you'll have a buddy in the league. But how do you guys get an edge on your competition before the league starts?
You want to go first, Jay? Go ahead.
Sure. I'd say know the league settings inside and out is probably the first step, and that's just to echo your perspective there. Like I put a lot of time and effort into like rankings, tiers, and clusters, and I can go through any of that stuff. But like just having some sort of like plan in terms of players, and what I'd say is, you're spending the time to learn those things, and then you're applying those costs over multiple leagues because now you're familiar with those things. It's sort of you've done the work for one league, then you just kind of make those adjustments of what the next league are in the setting. But it's not necessarily you have to go really far outside of one way or another, but what consensus is. But just sort of knowing what the consensus is and sort of having that plan. The other thing I'd say is I'd love to know my draft slot. If this is a startup, I love to know my draft slot and the settings early, at least a week or two ahead of time before the actual draft. And then what I do is I go in and put the settings in Sleeper and Mock Draft a ton to see the different variations of what my team could look like. Well, let's say I do it this way. Let's say I do it that way. Let's say it works this way. But so I work off of this. I kind of do sort of these clustering type of group. And what I like to do is I separate players out by age and points per game, estimated points per game. And then I also like to factor in this third variable, which is keep trade cut values. So, like what pricing looks like. And I use those three variables to kind of bucket players in the same groups. And then I'm sort of paying attention to how the draft board's going and sort of coming up with a plan, how I want to do it, depending on my draft slot, depending on the settings and all those mock drafts. But then I'm sort of also amenable to also make changes on the fly if the draft, because we've all been there, the draft sometimes goes differently than how you're expecting it to, depending on who those players are. So just being able to know everything, have information on everything, and be able to pivot or change if that strategy is changing within the draft itself.
Doug, are you on the same?
I'm going to pretty much echo everything you just said. It's you hit on a lot of the topics that I would have hit on here. To me, I keep going what I would say. My ranking system, big board. Create a big board well before your draft, and feel free to tweak it along the way. But also remember why you are doing it. Why are you putting those players in those spots? Doesn't hurt to keep notes on each player that you find over the course of the. As you find notes, it doesn't hurt to keep. As you find player notes, it doesn't hurt to write those notes in below or to the side of the ranking of each player. Obviously, do what you can to run through multiple simulations and try different things, just as Jay mentioned. With that said, I want players I believe in, but find that it helps me to continually think about drafting good young players and how much trade value they may have. Just like in redraft, the focus should not be trying to win your league in May or August. It's obviously we're playing for November, December, and January. Mostly December and January. But the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to accumulate as much value as you can throughout the offseason and before your league's trade deadline. And then maybe, I'm not saying trade. There's one league when I accept a trade tonight, it'll be my 5th trade in that league this season. And I feel like I've totally remade that team into a team that I love more than the one. And we've talked about that team, JJ, and we'll probably talk about it off the air unless you want to talk about it on the air. But accumulate as much value as you can. And so you're the Pied Piper. You're the guy that people want. Oh my God, I can't believe you have 5 24-year-old receivers. And then you're either, if your season is sucking for some reason, you're going to have multiple people offer their first round picks and then you could be walking into your next draft. If your team is really tanking or your team is really sucking that year, you might walk into the next draft with 5 first round picks. Likewise, if your team is staying healthy and everybody's just cruising, okay, well, then still you still got the trade value, but then you're really liking your team going on to the next year. So it's thinking about good young players and having those high value players, and we've talked about what those guys already. Receivers hold their value, that type of stuff. Does not hurt to go into the trade deadline and every offseason knowing that you have 4 receivers that everybody wants, and like I said, it's great to be the Pied Piper at the trade deadline. It's great to be the Pied Piper in the offseason, and it's part of the fun. It's part of the fun of Dynasty. It's all.
So,
yeah, I'd say the just to follow on there, the big lessons learned in just going from redraft to Dynasty was sort of that quarterbacks and wide receivers definitely hold that value a little bit better than some of the other positions, and that age really matters. In redraft, you could go robust running back, or put a old running back crew together and have a win. But in Dynasty, like getting over that age gap, and that's why you bring in age, points per game, and some sort of value element to it. It really helps you sort of understand that concept, and hopefully you get to it earlier and then making some of the mistakes that you can get into if you're not focusing on age or some of those positional values.
Now, I love all of that, and I love how reflective we are, right? I love being reflective and thinking about what we're doing and how we're going to attack it. Now, I know a friend of ours, Leo Pasiga. He has advocated for years. The thing that I remembered him from for years was his notebook idea, right? Leo pushes the idea of keeping a notebook for each league, and for each manager, he writes down tendencies, what they look for. So like, as Jay's talking, if I'm in a league with him, like I'm writing down what he's saying, right? I'm writing down what Doug's saying. I'm watching his moves. What does he look for? Do either of you, because I don't do that. I want to do it, but I'm never as organized as I should be. Do either of you keep notes on your competition?
Go ahead, Jay.
No, I don't write down anything, but as I get familiarity with people, I do like remember sort of their tendencies and strategies and what their emphases are. If I'm playing with guys that make content in the industry, generally I'll sort of read up on stuff that they've published or what they're kind of doing, and that's sort of an easy way to do it, and you don't have to like constantly be writing in the notepad behind that, and that makes that a little easier. But I think through being active, through staying in the know and trading through your league, you'll start to understand what some of their tendencies are and who you can go to. And like there's some people that will accept trades just because they see that it's a fair trade and they want to keep a good relationship with people, and there's just sort of just this flow to it, and so that does make a lot of sense, I think, from that perspective. But no, I'm not writing down the notes of each of the message. I think it's more of like keep it up in my head type of strategy.
Doug, what about you? Can you fit that all in your cranium, or do you have to write some of it down before you forget?
Have you seen my cranium? It's
quite sizable.
Yeah, I'm with Jay on this one, although I want to move to where Leo is. Officially, I don't keep a notebook, but I do know the movers and shakers in all my leagues, and I don't have that many Dynasty leagues yet where I'm running into where I have 100 different managers, and I'm trying to convince people like yourselves that I got the mental book on everybody. That's not the way it is. So like I said, the movers and shakers in my leagues, which ones want all the draft picks, and we know those guys, the ones that I can think of one in particular, did a startup, must be 2022. He had no ambition or no desire to compete that year. So he ended up getting like 6 first-round picks for the last draft. So he comes away with Bijan and Jameer Gibbs and I think Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he had the first 3 picks of the rookie draft. Anyway, so you get the ones who want all the draft picks, the ones who love to trade just to trade. I told you about the league that I'm in. I'll be doing my fifth completed trade tonight. I think either 2 or 3 of those trades are with the same guy. And I'll give you. I wasn't going to give you this example, but I'll give you this example. He offers me, I think it was last week or week before. I think it was last week. He offers me. I have David Montgomery in all of my high stakes leagues. Again, I don't have that many, but I have enough. But he offers me Keenan Allen in a 2025 first round pick for David Montgomery. Okay, of course I'm going to take that. I love Montgomery. He's going on 27. We're looking at 2 more years from him. Anyway, I'm telling you that because a week later He then trades Montgomery away for Amari Cooper and a 3rd-round pick. Are you following me on the math on that? So does he just like the trade? Did he get disillusioned because I said all I wanted to do was trade Montgomery away for a draft pick and he happened to give me his first? I don't know why he did it, but he did it. So
I mean, not to get off topic, but he traded Keenan and a first for Cooper and a 3rd.
No, well, essentially, he traded me. I gave him Montgomery. He gave me Keenan Allen in the first. Then about a week later, he trades away Montgomery for Keenan Allen. I'm sorry, for Amari Cooper
and a 3rd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
listen, everybody makes a mistake in Dynasty. Right? Back to our first point.
So anyway, so coming around to what you said about Leo, as my life begins to slow down over the next few years, and I believe it or not, I'm pushing 50, so my life's going to slow down here eventually. Okay, I think I will start taking more actual written notes and not more than just mental notes on each manager. I think it's a great idea if you have time to do it.
I've definitely started writing things down more as I approach 50 myself, because I don't remember everything as quite as well as I want to anymore. But I think this is a good time. Now that we're all ready for our drafts in our conversation, it's important to remember that there is nothing better than a live draft. Literally, nothing is better than a live draft. So get ahead of your competition right now with Trophy Smack's gorgeous draft boards, complete with player stickers so deep you couldn't possibly need them all. And for the first time, Trophy Smack has an IDP expansion pack for all of us defensive degenerates. No more scribbling names on blank stickers. Go to Trophy Smack and get the only draft board that meets all of your needs. Check out the link in the show notes and get yours today. All right, gentlemen, this is one of the more contentious topics in our industry. How to draft a team. And we're not going to go deep into draft strategy tonight. We're going to talk like an overview of all the draft strategies that are thrown at newcomers, from 0 RB truthers to bully RB believers. Is there one strategy, Jay, that you prefer to others?
No, I just like to emphasize the quarterbacks and the wide receivers. But that's just more of I guess my strategy would be more along the lines of just don't give away value throughout the whole process. And you give away value by reaching and doing things that you probably shouldn't do. And so I would advocate that you draft close to ADP and you trade for value for the most part. So instead of taking a guy that usually gets a 6th-round ADP and drafting him in the 4th round of ADP, I would rather figure out a way to trade down to do that if you don't like anybody in that 4th round. And so that's just a quick example. It doesn't that doesn't necessarily always happen that exact way. But the point is that I just want to kind of stay close to ADP as I'm going through this and not give away value throughout the whole process. The other sort of suggestions I'd have in terms of the drafting is just pay attention to runs on particular positions. So if you have a position that's kind of like Superflex, we talked about quarterbacks, you can have very long runs of quarterbacks, and by the time it gets back to you, there might not be that quarterback that you need. And so quarterback is one of those positions, but you can have a run of 7 wide receivers before you get there, and you typically don't want to be at the end of these types of runs. So that's one of those situations where you might take a zag in terms of what your strategy is on that particular piece. The other say this kind of goes along with sort of the notes type of thing, and it really isn't that hard, but paying attention to the team that the players have drafted that are right next to you on either side of you, straddling you. So if you're drafting in the 11 spot and the 12 spot, you look at his team constantly as you're going through the draft, and he's probably going to go quarterback there, or he needs a tight end. He hasn't hit tight end yet. If you can hit the player that you need before he's likely to take that player before it comes back to you, I think just paying attention to those particular drafters that are in your close proximity. It doesn't have to be, plus or minus 3 on either side, but if you can handle plus or minus 1 or maybe even plus or minus 2 while the draft's going on, I think that'll be helpful. And then, like we talked about the positional value of quarterbacks, and particularly in Superflex. I like to bolster my Superflex teams with 2 significant quarterbacks, and sometimes that has to do with trading, sometimes that has to do with good drafting and good draft strategies. But I do have an emphasis on quarterbacks, and I like to have that top end quarterback if I can through most of my leagues. I also think it's also important. Although there has been quite a bit of a change at the tight end position, I do think it's important to stay in that top end tight end position. And if you're not in the very top of it, so I'm talking like top 6 of the top 12, and if you're not in the top part of that tight end group, I'd actually advocate for sort of passing till much later rounds and trying to scoop up value, because there's this sort of this replacement level piece of it that has to. So if you're not going to get the very top end, which I would definitely advocate for, trying to figure out a way where you can grab 2 decent quarterbacks and a tight end throughout this process. I'd advocate that you sort of wait a little bit longer on the tight ends. And then in the later rounds, that's where I'm looking for really, really high end upside where you can take shots. And so a lot of times when you get into the later rounds, you're kind of looking for like the steady Eddie that can fill a roster spot. And what I kind of want in Dynasty is like that like younger rookie guy that if he blows up, his value will increase substantially. So like, that 30-year-old wide receiver will be somebody that you can play in your lineup, but even if he goes off, his value is not going to change from where it is. In the later rounds, I want to take a shot on those guys that can increase substantially in values. And then one final point is, I talked about like sort of draft at ADP, trade for value. I don't want to give up that pick value, but what I would like to do throughout my draft, if it's possible in this startup draft, is try and trade for future first rookie picks. And that has a lot to do with sort of the clustering piece of it. So like if I can find a player that is of a similar age and a similar points per game potential, maybe even a little bit lower on like a value, however you value them, like whether it's KTC or Pricer or however you would want to do it. But if I can sort of like cluster down, stay within a cluster, but also pick up like rookie picks, those rookie picks are one of the best stores of value that you can have throughout in Dynasty football. And it's not necessarily about like what the next class is about or anything like that. It's just that rookie picks almost always appreciate over time. And I actually have a study out there on Twitter that I did where I sort of graphed this, where rookie picks sort of just appreciate for most seasons of the year. It's just sort of this incredible store of value that then you can use sort of as currency, depending on if you need to change your strategy going forward. But just sort of if you can trade from an early second to a late second and get a guy of a similar value to you that you think fits in a similar cluster, and then you're able to pick up their first next year. That first next year is that just going to appreciate in value and will help you will help act as a currency to change your strategy or enhance your strategy going forward. So, a lot in there, a lot to talk about, but those are kind of how I think about drafting when I'm doing that startup draft.
And even with what you were saying about draft picks, even if you know that everybody's saying the next draft class is going to be a bad draft class, once that draft class is here and they're getting drafted,
it's not so bad.
Everybody is excited. It doesn't matter. Like, it could be the worst wide receiver crew coming out ever. Somebody's going to be excited about him. So don't sell yourself short by trying to project what you think they're going to be worth. Draft picks accumulate value. Great point, Jay. Doug, is there a strategy that you stick to?
Well, I'll just say, first of all, I really love the last 3 points that you made. And I would have stories for each of them, but I can't remember all the 3 that I really like. So, but I'll speak to the last 2 if I can remember them. For example, I keep teasing this trade. I'm probably going to say I have to tell you what it is here before too long, but but I insisted on this trade. I might as well tell you now, and then we can talk about it off air. I'm going to end up trading Christian McCaffrey, Cooper Kupp, and Elijah Mitchell for Jahmyr Gibbs, the 203, and Deuce Vaughn. I'm sure that's a lot to. I insisted on Deuce Vaughn because he offered me Tyler Scott. I said I've got 4 receivers, Keenan Allen being the 4th, that I'm going to play every week. I'm in good shape at receiver. Is Deuce Vaughn going to be this earth-shattering, every week RB2 great flex? I don't know. Maybe not. But I know last year when I watched, did my draft profiles and whatnot, and then he got drafted by Dallas, I'm thinking this guy's the potential replacement for Tony Pollard. I'm not saying he is the next Tony Pollard. I'm saying he's the replacement for Tony Pollard.
Tony Pollard wasn't even the next Tony Pollard.
Exactly. So I watched Deuce Vaughn in college. I watched him. It was just one big run against Alabama, but I watched him tear up other teams too in the defense optional Big 12. But the point being is he is a good running back. He's just unfortunately small. So why am I bringing this up? Because I think there is an outside chance that he can have a reduced Tony Pollard role. So that means more to me than Tyler Scott, who I like the talent, but I was going to cut him as soon as I got him if it's all the same to the other owner, I just insisted on a guy who I think has a chance. I don't think Tyler Scott has a chance now because he's behind 3 really good receivers. So, that's one of those things that I think it was the 3rd point that you touched on there, Jay. And I just wanted to mention that because I think I know that has more to do with trading than drafting, but the point is value. We're really thinking about value. The last point you touched on about in trying to trade for future first. Okay, so in the league I referenced, this is the same league. So now I have 2 firsts in that league. Let's say I, by some chance, am able to secure another first-round pick sometime between now and week 10, which is, I think, the trade deadline. So I go into the next year's rookie draft, and even if I have, let's say, picks 8, 10, and 12, you know how hard it is for the guy that pick 1 how hard it's going to be for him to turn down 3 first for 101. That's going to be hard. And that this upcoming class, just as an example, is supposed to be really good at running back. Whether it is or not is another story, but there's at least 5 guys that are supposed to be potential, if not featured backs, definitely strong lead backs. So yeah, just what you said about first round picks accumulate or increasing in value. Absolutely, do what you can. Do what you can to acquire more of those. Anyway, to what I was going to say, how I draft my team, I will continue to stay until the end of time that I will draft the best player available. Within that comes something of an inherent knowledge that receivers have a better chance of making it through the season than any other position. However, and I will use a startup draft from last year to illustrate my point. I was focused on going receiver heavy early enough in that draft until Breece Hall, coming off his ACL injury, fell into my lap in the middle of the 2nd round. Dynasty is all about playing the long game, and I had a pretty good feeling that if Hall didn't have a setback, he would probably be a top 3 back this year. So, as I learned many years ago as a production assistant at ESPN, almost 20 years ago now, that makes me cry. If I could cry on air, I would. But as I learned about that when I was a PA there at ESPN, have a plan going into it there, have a plan going into your highlight, and be willing to go in a different direction if the game you are covering takes you there. Same thing with the draft here. You go in with a plan and be willing to go in a different direction if the draft takes you there. scrapping the plan may seem like not sticking to your guns, but preparing well is never a bad idea, and it's going to serve you well at some point down the road.
Well, the better you prepare, the more prepared you are for the unknown.
Yep.
I mean, that just might be my OCD or anxiety speaking, but I'm a rehearser. Like I practice like every day before I teach a lesson to the kids. I teach the lesson out loud alone in my room, just to try to like poke holes in and see what's going to happen. So always be prepared.
And Jay, what you don't know about this show is that JJ makes me get up at 6 a.m. in the morning, and we prepare for this too. So
I do. I'm very, very, very mean.
Every morning.
Every morning.
Every morning.
You need 6 days, right? 6 days of preparation.
Absolutely. 6 full days. Gentlemen, is there anything else you want to add about strategy? Or are we good?
I would say for new dynasty leagues, new dynasty players, it doesn't really matter what the mechanism is, but I would look at some sort of trade calculator out there while you're getting sort of your feel for how things are moving. And the point is that like if you've come from a redraft mindset or you've never played before, like the age piece of it and how things, there's different positional preferences does play a role in trading, and you can get in some sort of lot-sided trades where you sort of lose value. So my philosophy in most of these things is let's make sure the trade balances. I'm not trying to gyp anybody or pull one over on somebody. Let's just make sure the trade balances so that, like, at least on average, on the way that consensus is looking at things, that things balance out. And so it only takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes to just pop one open. Before you make that trade, just pop it in there, see what it says. And it might say, you're giving up a little, or you're not giving up, or, you're taking a little too much, or maybe you hit accept pretty quick on that. Or maybe you come back and you say, hey, this doesn't really balance. Are you sure you don't want to add a little bit? And then the next deal, they'll be more willing to work with you. And there's these leagues can get out of whack if people are sort of taking advantage of other managers. And so just that extra check, I think, going to Keep Trade Cut or Fantasy Calc or whatever, just typing in the trade, they're all free, and just seeing what that looks like. And it might give you pause. It might make you say, yes, this is awesome. Whatever it is, just that final check, I think, will help the future of the league in general going forward. And that was a little bit of a lesson learned for me. It was just sort of doing that one. And if you don't want to do the trade calcs, you think those are garbage, that's just run it by somebody that you trust. DM me, DM somebody in the industry that you're the community
any of us
familiar with, any of us, and just run it by them and say, like, hey, does this make sense? And it doesn't even have to be somebody in the community. It could be a league mate that you're friends with, or that you've built a relationship, or that you've done other trades with. You can say, hey, does this make sense? Before you do it. So I think that's like as you make your foray into Dynasty and you learn that age is important. It's not just about how many points you score, and value is important, and not giving away value through trading is really, really important. And so I'd say that's one final step that I think that new Dynasty managers should really pay attention to. And I'm not pushing any particular kind. I just want to make sure that you have that check, that you're not getting taken advantage of.
Yeah, like a sanity check. Just to make sure. If something's too good to be true, it's either because you might have missed some news or somebody else has extra information. It never hurts to check it. And you don't have to go off of the trade calculator. You don't have to build your trades through it. But it's a good reference point.
Yeah, JJ, I don't know if it might surprise you. I like the idea of trade calculators as well. It's not, and I don't know about Jay. I mean, you can speak to this. I don't have much to say about extra stuff here, but I'm fairly well. I've been in the fantasy game now for almost a quarter of a century. I'm not the typical fantasy manager I'm not saying that I bring infinite amount of more knowledge to the table than everybody else. I'm not saying that, but it's when you spend as much time doing this as I do, you don't think like the typical manager because you're putting more time into it and doing more research than pretty much anybody that you're going to come up in contact with. Trade calculators help me think like the typical manager, and I need to be able to think of that common guy view in order to help me. Why does this trade seem like it's so lopsided to the guy I'm talking to, or I need to adjust my values because my values are off or whatever. This trade calculators, and believe me, if you go to 5 different trade calculators, they're going to probably tell you 5 different things. One's going to tell you won the deal handily. Another one's going to tell you not in a million years should you do that trade. So the trade I referenced, I keep referencing the McCaffrey Gibbs one. I wanted to try a few different calculators just to see what they said, and I got basically everything from you're a genius to what the hell are you thinking? So
that probably means it's good then.
There you go. And then the second thing is, don't be overly concerned about winning trades. Is it close? And I'm going to go back to the trade calculator here. If one side is telling you, I'm just going to give you an example. One trade calculator I like to use is the Dynasty process one. So if one side is telling you 9,500 points, and your side is the side you're getting back is 9,200 points, look, it doesn't matter. Does it help your team? And does it put you in a better position to win? If your plan is to win next year, does that help you to do that? If your plan is to win this year, does it help you do that? Believe me, those values change quickly enough, and you might lose 1,000 points, just like the stock market. You might lose 1,000 points in 3 months, and 6 months later, you've won the deal so handily. You kick yourself for not having accepted it. So think about it. Moves that you make, even free agency moves. Think about moves. What does it help my team, and does it help my team win this year or next year or whatever my goal is?
Yeah. And most importantly, and don't lose sight of this, because I think this is the most important thing. Have fun. Have fun. Right? When in doubt, pick a player that you like so you can cheer for him as you go along. Sigmund Bloom always used to say that on the podcast, and that's something I adhere to. I like dynasty teams that win, and I like the ones that win with players I like even a little bit more, right? So don't just go out there, have fun, lose some trades, figure it out, and listen, in a few years, you'll be into all the weird stuff too. So it is time to say goodbye. Jay, where can the good people find you, and what are you working on?
Over the Devy Royale, we have a Patreon. It's Kevin Coleman and Kyren Williams, and there's a few other people that are in there as well doing stuff. I work the series called the Dynasty Investor series. So I haven't quite published my first one on the Devy Royale, but it's been a series that was on Football Guys and was on Dynasty Nerds. So I'm sort of working through it. I've charts out there that you can look at. And really it's basically a different way of looking at value. And I think it's quite unique. It has a lot to do with, I guess I'll talk about it. It's the PE ratio, price to earnings ratio, where I look at KTC over points per game. And then I cluster players into points per game and age, and sort of look for values among the players. And it's an interesting thing. I keep a track record, just like you would have a stock portfolio. I keep a track record, and I'm looking for mispricings. So when we talked about sort of that piece with Kyren Williams in the very beginning of this episode, that's the kind of stuff where I'm sort of keeping track of those things, and I sort of chart things and put things on graphs, so it makes it fun to visualize and look at. I also do a lot of data analytics for rookie evaluation and then for Devy evaluation. So I'm looking at trying to use those metrics that sort of are predictive and could correlate to some success in the NFL on the rookie class and the future rookie classes. So, we get a good idea. We there at the Devy Royale, we have tons of podcasts that span all the way from Devy and college fantasy football to campus to Canton, all the way up to just straight dynasty, all different types of dynasty fantasy football. We have rankings. We have all, and it's a really great community. So if you join the Patreon, it's just like a really cool place to hang and chat and hang out. And you can find dynasty leagues and Devy leagues and campus to Canton leagues in there. We have, different channels set up where you can sort of advertise those things. So if you are looking, that could be a place to kind of join and get some advice, and also find a good community where you can join some leagues as well.
Awesome. Doug.
Yep, don't have anything articles to tease that I haven't already teased on previous episodes. So you can find me just at the handle you see on the screen here, DOUGORTH. And I'll throw it back to you, JJ.
Well, I'm at JJ Wenner on X. Thank you, Jay, for coming on. I'm so glad we finally got to do something together. Make sure you're following him on Twitter. Make sure you are, join the Patreon for the Devy Royale. There are a lot of really, really smart people in there. So jump on in. Thank you to Doug for all of his work, as always, Doug. Special thanks to the whole crew at IDP Plus, Gary and Brittany, for helping us put this together. You can catch me on the Rider Dynasty podcast this Friday with Jameson and Joe. We're going to do a 4-round IDP and offensive rookie mock draft. Be sure to tune in next Wednesday, when Doug and I will talk some about players who we want to buy or sell by tier. We're just putting that together now. It should be interesting. But more importantly, thank you for tuning in. And remember, when in doubt, go all out. And as always, boat drinks, my friends.